Don't say a word. Don't! Natalia's breath caught in her throat as her eyes locked with his. At the entrance of the bridal boutique, there he was. Alexander, the billionaire CEO she hadn't seen in over a decade. The one person she'd sworn never to face again. And now, standing just feet away, was their daughter. The daughter he never knew existed. Natalia watched as Alexander's eyes scanned her daughter, Emily, as if searching for something. His gaze froze, locking on Emily's face. It was that look, the one she knew all too well, the one that once softened her heart before everything fell apart. But this time his expression hardened as recognition hit. A wave of panic surged through Natalia as Alexander slowly crouched down in front of Emily. The moment his eyes met her daughter's, the truth was undeniable. The same eyes, hazel, intense, just like his. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a mirror. In that instant, everything Natalia had spent the last 12 years trying to hide, the lies, the secrets, was laid bare. Her past was no longer hers to keep, and the life she'd built to protect Emily from this world was about to come crashing down. Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for helping this channel reach 350 subscribers. As the holiday season approaches, I just want to say Merry Christmas in advance to every one of you who keeps showing up, listening, and sharing these stories. Now, today's story is one of those moments where the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how much money or power tries to hide it. Imagine attending your billionaire CEO ex's wedding, watching your daughter walk down the aisle as the flower girl, and realizing that the man at the altar is seeing her face for the very first time. A face he shouldn't recognize, a moment that wasn't supposed to happen, and a truth that surfaces right in the middle of a perfect celebration. This story is about secrets, timing, and the single second that changes everything. Thank you again for 350 subscribers. Let's step into today's story. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Natalia had promised herself she would never let Alexander back into their lives. She'd kept him at arm's length all these years, raising Emily alone in the shadows. But the day Emily was chosen as the flower girl at a wedding she was planning, his wedding, everything changed. And now, standing face to face with the man who'd walked away, Natalia had to confront everything she'd tried to bury. As she stood there, frozen, the weight of those long-forgotten memories crashed down on her. Alexander's gaze never wavered from Emily, his confusion palpable, and Natalia could feel the tremor in her own chest, the same one she'd felt when they'd last spoken, what felt like a lifetime ago. But this was no longer about the two of them. It was about the little girl standing between them, the child who carried both their hearts, their love, and their broken promises. A year before the world, as Natalia knew it, would fracture, there was a summer in Napa Valley. The vineyards stretched endlessly beneath the hazy sun, and the air tasted like sweet freedom. It was the kind of summer where anything felt possible, where every whispered word between her and Alexander held promises of forever. The kind of love that made the world seem small and insignificant, as if nothing could tear them apart. She remembered the first time he had kissed her under the sprawling oak tree. The sun dipped low, casting shadows on his sharp jaw and tousled hair. His eyes, dark and intense, locked onto hers, and everything else, everything faded. He had promised that they would make it, that no matter what came next, their love would be the constant they could both hold on to. But they were both young, both chasing after futures they hadn't yet fully understood. Alexander had his sights set on conquering the world, rising through the ranks of the Thorn Empire. He was born into privilege, and the weight of it all had always been there, pressing down on him like a secret he couldn't outrun. Natalia had known this. She had never wanted to change him, only be the one who stood by his side through everything. But she hadn't known that standing by him would eventually mean losing herself. The phone call came late one night. Alexander, distracted and distant, hadn't heard the sharp edge in her voice when she told him she was pregnant. He didn't understand the gravity of the situation, or maybe he just didn't want to. She could hear his hesitation through the phone. He was already distancing himself, his words cold and detached. "I'm not ready for this, Natalia," he had said. "I can't do this right now." The silence that followed crushed her. Every dream she had built with him came tumbling down in that one fateful moment. He was scared. She was scared too. But her fear was different. Hers was the fear of raising a child alone, a child who would grow up in a world where Alexander's name would never be enough to claim her. When the calls and texts went unanswered, Natalia knew she couldn't wait for him to come around. There would be no sweeping gestures, no reunion, no dramatic apology that would make everything right again. There was only her and the life she was about to bring into the world. She moved back to Las Vegas, to a small apartment on the edge of town, where she could live quietly, without the ever-present pressure of the Thorn family breathing down her neck. She knew what raising a child alone meant. She'd seen it firsthand in her own mother's struggle. But she also knew that Emily deserved a life free of the complicated web of wealth, status, and expectations that Alexander's world would thrust her into. The Thorn name had too much power, and Natalia couldn't risk her daughter being swallowed up by it. She would keep Emily safe. She would be enough. But it was harder than she thought. There were moments when she wished she could just pick up the phone and tell Alexander. Tell him everything, beg him to be a father to their child. But she couldn't. The man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once promised her the stars, was already lost to the world of power and ambition. And so, she raised Emily alone, learning to navigate motherhood with grit and determination, never once telling her daughter who her father really was. Now, standing in that boutique, with Alexander's eyes locked on Emily's face, all the pain of those years alone came rushing back. The guilt weighed heavily on Natalia's chest, the sharp, bitter taste of regret filling her mouth. Had she made the right decision? Had she done the right thing by keeping Emily from her father? Or had she just been afraid of the pain it would cause her daughter, afraid of the truth that Emily was his daughter too, that no matter how hard she tried to hide it, Emily was a part of Alexander, a part of their past. And no matter how hard she'd worked to protect Emily from this world, it had all come to a head the moment Alexander walked into that boutique. The moment their eyes locked, and he saw it. "Don't say anything," she whispered to herself, more to steady her own heart than to stop Alexander from asking the questions that had been building in him for years. But it was too late. He already knew. He saw the truth in Emily's eyes, just as she had always known it would happen someday. Was it selfish of her to keep Emily from him? Was it wrong to protect her from a man who had never truly chosen her? And yet, even as these questions circled in her mind, she couldn't deny the deep, aching pull of responsibility. Could she really continue to keep Emily from her father? Or was it time to face the truth? even if it meant facing Alexander again. Sometimes the hardest part of motherhood isn't just protecting your child. It's protecting them from the truth. If you know what it feels like to make a sacrifice for your child, maybe this story will resonate with you. Natalia's heart clenched as she watched Alexander take another step toward Emily. She could feel his gaze on her now, no longer questioning, no longer confused. He had seen the truth, and now there was no going back. The weight of everything she had kept hidden all those years was hanging in the air between them, suffocating her. For a moment, just a fleeting moment, she wished things had been different. She wished they had been able to keep their promises to each other. But that was a dream long gone, lost in the tangled mess of time, distance, and betrayal. And now, standing in front of her, was the man she had once loved, and the daughter who was his, too. The truth was finally out. What would it mean for Emily now, and for her? All Natalia could do was wait for the storm that was sure to follow. The bridal boutique was elegant, almost intimidating, with its crisp white walls and high-end gowns draped delicately on mannequins. Natalia tried to keep the tension in her shoulders at bay as Emily, full of excitement, twirled in the flower girl dress she had been chosen to wear. The soft fabric fluttered around her small frame, and her dark curls bounced as she spun. She was everything Natalia had dreamed for her, a bright, innocent child who would never have to know the harshness of a world she wasn't meant for. But as Emily continued to dance, the door to the boutique opened, and all the air in the room seemed to vanish. Natalia didn't need to look up. She knew who it was the moment the soft chime of the doorbell sounded. Alexander. Her heart stuttered in her chest as she felt his presence behind her, like the weight of everything she'd tried to outrun. She quickly turned her face away, but it was too late. Emily's excited voice rang out, and in that moment, everything stood still. "Mom, look how pretty I look." Natalia tried to smile, her heart pounding. "You look gorgeous, sweetheart." But Alexander's gaze had already moved from the dress to Emily's face. His expression, once cool and neutral, faltered. A flicker of recognition passed through his dark eyes, something Natalia couldn't deny, even from across the room. She felt her chest tighten. He froze. There was no mistaking it. His eyes. Those eyes, the same ones that had once looked at her with so much love and then so much pain. And now they were staring at Emily with that same sharp intensity. "Is this—" His voice was barely above a whisper, but it hit Natalia like a tidal wave. It was impossible to ignore the shock that was written all over his face. Before she could stop herself, she spoke, her voice trembling. "Please, don't." But it was too late. He took a slow step forward, his face a mix of confusion and something else. Something darker. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Emily looked up at him, those wide, trusting eyes innocent and unaware. "Emily Thorne." The words hung in the air like an echo, crashing over Natalia. Her entire world tilted. She should have said something. She should have protected Emily from this moment. But she didn't. And now, there was no denying it. Alexander's face drained of color, and the room seemed to close in around them. The anger came next, slow but inevitable. His gaze snapped to Natalia, fury flashing across his features. "You didn't tell me?" he demanded, his voice low but sharp, like the edge of a blade. "All these years, you never once told me? Why? Why didn't you tell me she was mine?" The anger in his voice was a reminder of everything Natalia had feared. The world she had tried so desperately to protect Emily from was crashing down. She couldn't answer. She could only feel the weight of her guilt pressing down, suffocating her. How do you face someone who has no idea? You've been carrying a secret for years. If you've ever had to hide the truth to protect someone, then you know this pain. The silence in the boutique was deafening, and Natalia felt the familiar weight of the past settling on her shoulders. She couldn't escape it, not when Alexander was standing right there, demanding answers she didn't have the strength to give. His eyes, still full of that hurt and anger, were locked on her as if trying to piece together everything that had happened in the years they'd spent apart. But as she stared back at him, the memories came rushing back. Memories she had buried deep, locked away behind the walls she'd built around her heart. It was a late summer evening in the city. The golden light of sunset streaming through the windows of Alexander's penthouse. They were sitting on the balcony, a bottle of expensive wine between them, talking about their future. Or rather, talking about his future. He had big plans, too big to fit into the world they shared, a world where she worked late nights in the city's most exclusive clubs, trying to build a life that could support them both. "I can't wait to be in charge," he had said, his eyes shining with ambition. "I'm going to take this company to new heights, Natalia. I want you by my side always." But there was a catch, one she didn't fully realize until it was too late. His ambitions weren't just about success. They were about control. Alexander's life was a treadmill, one that never slowed down. And as his career took off, she found herself drifting further and further to the sidelines. Every time she needed him, he was too busy, too consumed by the weight of his family's expectations. His world was built on power, wealth, and influence, and in the end, it became too much to bear. Now standing in front of her, Alexander's face was a mix of disbelief and regret. He had once believed his path was the only one worth following, that nothing could slow him down, not even love. But now, with Emily standing between them, he was forced to confront the truth. His hand tightened into a fist. "I didn't know, Natalia," he whispered, almost to himself. "I didn't know you were carrying this burden, my burden." A shadow crossed his face as the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been blind, pushed into his mother's world. His mother, Barbara, who had always believed in keeping him within the walls of his inherited empire. Natalia had never been welcome there, never been good enough for the Thorne family. Barbara had made sure of that, making sure Alexander stayed away from her, from their life. "I thought I was doing what was best," Alexander continued, his voice breaking. "But my mother, she controlled everything. She kept me from you, kept me from knowing about Emily." It wasn't just his mother's influence, though. Alexander had been too focused on climbing higher in his career to even notice Natalia's struggle. He had been selfish, just as he had been when she needed him most. Natalia closed her eyes, the weight of everything she had tried to escape pressing down on her chest. The anger she had carried for so long toward Alexander was still there, but it was complicated now. There was love mixed in with it, love that had never truly faded, despite the years apart. It was this love that had made her keep Emily away from him. She had convinced herself that he wouldn't want this life, that Emily would only be a reminder of the pain Alexander had caused them both. But now, seeing him here, demanding answers, She realized how much she had been lying to herself. "I want a paternity test." Alexander's voice snapped her out of her thoughts. "I need to know if she's mine. And if she is." His eyes hardened, the man she had once known returning in full force. "I'm not letting you keep her from me, Natalia." Her blood ran cold. He was demanding what she had feared all along. The possibility that their past would tear apart the life she had worked so hard to build. She had built it in the shadows, keeping Emily safe, away from a world she thought would never understand them. But now Alexander was threatening to take it all away. When you've been wronged, but still can't help loving the person who hurt you, it's a tough place to be. If you've ever tried to rebuild from a broken past, you might just understand this story. Jessica had always been poised, a picture of wealth and elegance. But today, there was something colder in her demeanor, something calculating behind the gleam of her manicured smile. Natalia couldn't help but feel the subtle shift whenever she entered the room. The way Jessica's eyes lingered on Emily a little too long, the way her voice sweetened whenever she addressed her, something was off. At first, Natalia thought it was just the stress of the wedding. But as the days passed, it became clear. Jessica wasn't just a woman obsessed with her wedding day. She was using the situation to her advantage. "Is Emily still the flower girl?" Jessica's voice was soft but laced with an edge. She had cornered Natalia in the hallway of the bridal suite, her smile wide but her eyes sharp, assessing. "Yes," Natalia replied, trying to keep her tone neutral. "She's excited, and she's going to do great." Jessica leaned in slightly, her lips curling into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good." Because a little girl, with her charm. Her eyes flicked over to Emily, who was sitting quietly in the corner, oblivious to the tension. "Will add the perfect touch to the wedding. But it would be a shame if she were to back out, wouldn't it?" The insinuation in Jessica's voice sent a chill down Natalia's spine. Was she threatening her? Or was she simply testing how much control she had? The pressure continued to mount. As the wedding day drew closer, Jessica wasn't shy about making demands, and with each passing day, it felt like she was tightening her grip. She knew exactly how to manipulate the situation, pushing Natalia further into a corner. The wedding plans grew more complicated with every encounter, and it was clear that Jessica was enjoying the power she wielded over Natalia. Every conversation felt like a game of chess, with Jessica moving her pieces strategically, always staying a few steps ahead. "Is everything okay with Emily's dress?" Jessica asked one morning, her tone sweet but her eyes sharp. "I'd hate for something to go wrong at the last minute." "I'm sure everything's fine," Natalia replied, her voice tight, the stress of it all clawing at her. She knew Jessica was watching every move she made, looking for weaknesses, finding ways to use them against her. But the real twist came when Natalia stumbled upon a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. It was one of those moments when the world felt like it was closing in. She had come to the office early, hoping to catch up on the wedding details, but instead she overheard Jessica talking to Alexander's lawyer. "He'll believe whatever I tell him," Jessica's voice rang out, the coldness in it almost cruel. "If I say Natalia's been keeping Emily away because she wants revenge, he'll believe it. She's been hiding the truth for years, and it's time she pays for it." Natalia froze, her heart sinking into her stomach. She had suspected Jessica's manipulations, but this was different. Jessica wasn't just trying to control the wedding or assert her dominance. She was poisoning Alexander's perception of her, turning him against her with lies. Trust is a fragile thing, especially when you're forced to fight against someone who's already got a plan. If you've ever been caught in a web of lies, this part of the story might feel all too real. The letter came on a Wednesday, thick, embossed, and heavy enough to make Natalia's hands shake. She had just come home from another grueling shift at the grocery store, her mind on Emily's homework and the simple comfort of a quiet evening. But the moment she saw the gold lettering at the top of the envelope, Thorne and Associates, her stomach dropped. She already knew what it was before she tore it open. Inside was a neatly folded document printed on expensive paper. Legal jargon filled the page, but one line stood out like a wound. Natalia's breath caught. The room spun, her vision blurring as she sank into the couch. Her hands trembled around the paper, the words burning into her mind. This wasn't just Alexander reaching out as a father. This was Alexander Thorne, the billionaire CEO with a legal army behind him, coming to claim what he believed was his. Her heart ached. He wasn't asking, he was taking. By Friday, the whispers had already started. Alexander's lawyers moved fast, their efficiency terrifying. They filed motions, requested documentation, and even hinted at financial instability, painting Natalia as an unfit single mother trying to keep a child away from her wealthy father. She sat in her lawyer's small Las Vegas office, staring at the stack of papers spread across the desk. The fluorescent lights hummed above them, filling the silence she couldn't break. "I won't lie to you," said Diane Porter, her attorney, a kind woman in her late 40s with kind eyes that hid hard truths. "He has the kind of resources that can bury you in paperwork before you even step foot in court. We're going to fight, but this won't be easy." Natalia swallowed hard. "He can't just take her away." "No," Diane said softly, "but he can make it very, very difficult for you to keep her." They drafted statements, gathered documents, and organized receipts that proved Natalia had provided for Emily without help for 12 years. Every night after Emily went to bed, Natalia stayed up at the kitchen table, sorting through bank records and school forms, her tears smudging the ink. Meanwhile, Alexander's team made their move. He wasn't just fighting for custody, he was fighting for control. He wanted to rewrite the narrative, to paint himself as the father robbed of his rights, the victim of Natalia's deception. And it was working. His influence was everywhere. Social media buzzed with whispers, tabloids hinted at a hidden child, and paparazzi had even been spotted near Emily's school. Natalia's safe, quiet life was unraveling. Each night, Natalia looked at her sleeping daughter and wondered if she'd done the right thing all those years ago. She had kept Emily from him to protect her from this chaos, this spectacle. But now she was living the nightmare she'd feared most. She wanted to believe she could win. But how do you win against someone who can buy truth, twist perception, and erase your story with one phone call? For the first time, Natalia considered giving up, signing the papers, letting him have partial custody just to make it stop. But then she looked at Emily's face, peaceful in sleep, and knew she couldn't. Because Emily wasn't a headline. She wasn't a pawn. She was her daughter. And Natalia would fight until her last breath to keep her safe. When you have everything to lose, fighting back can feel impossible. If you've ever faced an uphill battle to protect what's most important, you'll know how Natalia feels in this moment. The hotel kitchen was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the clink of utensils as they hit the countertop. Natalia stood by the sink, staring at the custody papers that lay between her and Alexander. The weight of the situation was suffocating. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him to push so hard, to use every ounce of his power to take what was hers. But here they were, hours before the wedding, and everything was on the verge of unraveling. Alexander stood across from her, his jaw clenched tight, eyes dark with frustration. The man she once knew seemed so far removed from the man before her now. There was no trace of the soft, loving partner she had once known. There was only a man determined to reclaim what he thought was rightfully his. "You have to understand, Natalia," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, but full of force. "I'm her father. I deserve to be a part of her life." His words were laced with the desperation she had never heard before. "This isn't just about me. It's about her." Natalia's hands tightened around the edge of the counter, her knuckles white. She felt the heat rise in her chest, her body ready to snap. "You think you can just waltz back into her life after 12 years? After abandoning us both without a second thought? You think you deserve her because you finally decided you want to be her father?" The venom in her words cut through the air, but it didn't seem to faze him. His eyes never left her, the intensity growing with each passing second. "I didn't leave her," he shot back, his voice rising. "I didn't know, Natalia. You never gave me the chance to be a father. You made that decision for me." She could feel her emotions bubbling up, everything she had tried to bury for years, threatening to spill over. The anger, the hurt, the regret, all of it collided in that moment. She couldn't hold back the tears any longer. "You were never there? You were too busy with your precious thorn empire, too caught up in your world of power and greed to care about the woman who loved you, the child who was yours." His expression softened for just a moment, but it wasn't enough. His words sliced through her once again. "I was wrong. I've spent every day since regretting it. But you—" He stopped, his voice catching, his gaze faltering. "You made it impossible to fix it. You kept her from me. You kept us from me." Her heart ached as she stared at him, the pain of the past flooding back. She was so close to breaking. Just as the tension seemed to reach its breaking point, the door swung open with a sharp creak. Jessica walked in, her heels clicking against the tile floor. She stood there for a moment, surveying the room with a quiet smugness, her eyes flicking between the two of them. "Am I interrupting?" she asked, her voice dripping with sweet superiority. She didn't need to say more. The air was thick with the unspoken knowledge that she had entered at just the right moment to put herself between them. The argument that had been building exploded. "Stay out of this, Jessica," Natalia snapped, her voice harsh. "This is between me and him." "Oh, I think it's very much my business, don't you?" Jessica said, glancing at Alexander with a knowing look. "After all, I'll be Emily's stepmother soon." The words hit Natalia like a slap in the face. Stepmother. The thought of Emily in Jessica's world, under her influence, made her sick to her stomach. Her daughter didn't belong in a life of manipulation and control, and Jessica was only too willing to step in and take over. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. Natalia's hands clenched into fists, her whole body trembling with the weight of the battle she hadn't chosen but was now forced to fight. In the end, the hardest part isn't fighting for what's right. It's making sure you're not destroying everything along the way. If you've ever felt caught in a fight you never wanted, maybe This moment will hit home. The day had arrived. The sun blazed high in the sky, casting a golden glow over the sprawling estate where the Thorn wedding was set to take place. The lawns were manicured to perfection, and the air smelled of fresh roses. But for Natalia, the beauty of it all only heightened the tension in her chest. The entire world seemed to be watching, waiting for something she wasn't ready to give. As the morning passed, the preparations buzzed around her. The bridal suite was a whirlwind of activity, dresses being adjusted, flowers being arranged, and last-minute details being handled. Yet, no matter how much she focused on her work, Natalia couldn't shake the feeling that everything was closing in around her. Every step she took seemed to bring her closer to a confrontation she had been trying to avoid for over a decade. And there he was, Alexander, moving through the crowd like he owned it all, tall, commanding, as if nothing had changed. As the groom, he was the picture of perfection. His smile was sharp, his suit impeccably tailored, and his presence a reminder of everything Natalia had fought to keep from Emily. He was ready to claim what he thought was his, and nothing, not even the years of separation, was going to stop him now. Jessica hovered nearby, watching the scene with an air of triumph that Natalia could almost feel suffocating the air. The fiancée, the woman who had somehow weaseled her way into the heart of Alexander's world, was already playing her role perfectly, manipulating the situation to her advantage. She watched Natalia closely, her eyes like daggers, knowing full well the power she held in this moment. The ceremony was about to begin. Natalia stood near the aisle, adjusting Emily's dress one final time. Her daughter, her sweet, innocent Emily, was about to walk down the aisle in the middle of all this chaos. The child, who had no idea what was happening behind the scenes, who had no clue that her father's new world was one of control, manipulation, and power. As the first notes of the wedding march filled the air, Natalia's heart pounded. Emily skipped ahead, eager to take her place as the flower girl. Her laughter echoed in the space, pure and untainted by the world that surrounded them. But as Natalia watched her daughter walk down the aisle, she couldn't help but feel like a part of her was walking away too. The vows were exchanged. The moment felt surreal, as if time had suspended itself in a strange, suffocating bubble. Alexander spoke his words with such conviction, so sure of the future he was stepping into, while Jessica smiled with all the assurance of someone who had already won. Natalia stood off to the side, caught in a storm of emotions. She had spent the last 12 years convincing herself that she was protecting Emily, that she was doing what was best by keeping her away from Alexander. But as she watched him pledge his life to someone else, she realized that the battle she had fought wasn't just about keeping her daughter safe. It was about keeping her own heart intact. She couldn't protect Emily forever. The truth was out. The world anew. As the ceremony continued, Natalia's heart was heavy with the weight of her realization. She couldn't keep running from the past. She couldn't keep hiding in the shadows, hoping everything would somehow work itself out. Alexander was her daughter's father, and that fact, no matter how much she hated it, couldn't be ignored any longer. Her love for him had always been tangled with pain and regret, but it wasn't enough to bind them together. Not anymore. With every step that Emily took down the aisle, every word exchanged between Alexander and Jessica, Natalia knew what she had to do. She had to fight for Emily. She had to stand her ground, not for herself, but for the daughter she had promised to protect. When you love someone but know it's time to let go, it's one of the hardest choices you'll ever make. If you've ever had to walk away for something bigger than yourself, this chapter is for you. The day after the wedding, the truth hung over Natalia like a storm cloud. The vows had been exchanged, the celebration continued. But for Natalia, nothing had changed. Her decision was already made, though it took everything within her to finally accept it. She couldn't keep pretending that things would work out, or that Alexander's world, with all its power and control, could be anything but a threat to Emily. She had fought for this moment, for Emily, for her right to a future free from the damage of their past. But now, standing in the courthouse lobby, the weight of the battle settled on her shoulders. The legal papers were in her hand, and as the paternity test had confirmed, there was no longer any denying it. Alexander was Emily's father, but that wasn't enough to make him the right choice for her. The final hearing was set, and Natalia was more determined than ever. She walked into the courtroom, her head held high, ready to fight for Emily's future. Alexander stood on the other side, his lawyer by his side, his face unreadable. The tension between them was palpable, and as they exchanged glances, Natalia could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. "Your Honor," Alexander's lawyer began, "we are requesting full custody of Emily Thorne, based on the fact that her biological father has the means to provide her with a life of opportunity, financially, emotionally, and with the resources to secure her future." Natalia's heart clenched, but she held steady. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about power. It was about Emily's well-being, about her being raised in a world where she could find love and stability, not constant turmoil. Natalia stood, her voice unwavering as she addressed the court. "I've given my daughter a life filled with love, security, and honesty. I've been the one there for her every day, every step of the way. Alexander may be her father, but he hasn't been a part of her life. Not until now. Emily deserves a chance to grow up without being used as a pawn in a game of power." The words hung in the air, and for the first time in this entire process, Natalia felt the strength of her own voice, the power of standing up for what she knew was right. The judge deliberated, and the silence in the room seemed to stretch forever. But as the final verdict was read aloud, a sense of relief washed over Natalia. The court granted her primary custody of Emily, with supervised visitation for Alexander. It was a small victory, but it was enough. She had fought for what mattered most, and she had won. As she walked out of the courtroom, her pulse still racing, she felt a weight lift from her chest. It wasn't over, not completely. There would be battles ahead. There always were. But for the first time in years, Natalia felt like she was standing on solid ground, not drowning in a sea of uncertainty. The next few weeks were filled with change. Alexander tried, in his own way, to be part of Emily's life, but Natalia kept her distance. She had no illusions about what that world would do to her daughter. Emily deserved to be free of the expectations that had always hung over Alexander's head. And as for her relationship with Alexander, it had ended long before this court battle began. She had loved him once deeply, but the truth was, she couldn't stay tied to someone who didn't see the importance of what really mattered. Emily was her world now, and nothing would come between them. One afternoon, as Natalia and Emily sat on the couch reading a book together, Emily looked up and smiled. "Mommy, do you think I'll be okay?" Natalia held her tightly. "You're more than okay. You're perfect." And in that moment, as Emily's head rested against her shoulder, Natalia knew that she had made the right choice. She was finally free. Free to protect her daughter. Free to build a future without the weight of their past dragging them down. It's never easy to let go, especially when you've fought for something for so long. If you've ever had to walk away from love to protect what matters most, this is the final chapter of this journey. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.